definition of a group, multiple individuals.
Yes.
So you're the bouncer at this elusive group of Australians, Aussies. Who gets in the door?
You just can't think of it that way.
Well, you're in a group.
Trend.
Okay.
It's like
let's just go to the basic language. You're in a group and you're out of a group, right?
It's like trying to say this. What is do you have the average amount of kids? Do you have 2.3 kids? No, or not 2.3, 1.7. Nobody has 1.7 kids. But you can still say that there is an average amount of kids.
In that thing, you'd be a parent or you'd be not a parent. So you can be a parent at different degrees, but you're talking about we and them. Right? You're saying like 20 will get replaced eventually by immigrants. And I'm saying, well, I don't understand.
It's time for Lefties Losing It.
The rightist leftist is that's a good name too, by the way. I like that
shout
name.
out to you.
But shout out to you, bro.
Hello and welcome to the Rightist Leftist with Nathan Ogilvie. Today we have an interview with a commenter on the channel. I'm not sure yet if he's a hater or a supporter of the show, but we will find out either way in this conversation. Welcome to the show, Matt.
Thanks for having me.
Welcome on, Matt. Now, we probably need to give the audience a little bit of context for how we sort of started interacting. So I've got your little avatar here. My first question is, so you come up on the screen as Caterpillar, or Mr. Caterpillar, as I call you. So can I first ask, why Caterpillar? What's the appeal of caterpillars?
I mean, I can't even remember all of this stuff that I did. I don't even know. I think it was just, I don't know. There's something just very like wholesome about caterpillars, I think.
Oh yeah. I loved them I love caterpillars as a kid. It's just funny. I think the reason I just showed this is because it shows the difference between when someone comments online, if you have this much context to go with who you're interacting with, because as we're going to get into, I would say it sounds like, I'll let you elaborate, but it sounds like we do sort of disagree politically, maybe even in our basic philosophy, because you described to me in our sort of email exchange that you consider yourself like a libertarian right-winger. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that's right. And I guess, we could talk about what that means, but like the way I see the difference between libertarian versus authoritarian is like how much you want to use the state to actually enforce your opinion. And then what your opinion is a separate question. So
yeah, sure. Yeah. And so that's the authoritarian / libertarian. What would you say sort of leads you to be more of a right winger? Like, you don't have to, again, on this show, you don't have to disclose who you vote for, but what sort of pulls you towards the right? What's the appeal there in your view?
I don't know. It's really hard to put that into just one thing. I guess if you go through issues, when I go through the issues, I just find that I tend to be more on that side.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Yeah.
It wasn't always that way, but
yeah, okay.
Like I grew up in a family my family's very much Labor / Greens voters. And that's the way I always was up until I was about 23 years old, maybe. And I don't know, I guess I just started to realize that like it's important to like have a country and to actually have, there's no point just throwing away what we have, just for nothing sort of thing. So I guess that's what it comes down to.
Okay, so you're kind of a reverse. I know if you know much of my history I talk about in certain videos, but like my family was conservative, and then I'm not neither Greens or Labor, but my family's definitely right wing, and I'm on the left. Your family sounds like they're more on the left, and you've currently, as you said, you're more towards the right wing at the moment. Yeah. So it's a good question. You sort of said like that we need to have a country, or we need to have. I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but it sounds like you're implying there that the left damage the country or take something away. So maybe we'll start with, as you said, I think I tried to ask as a general question, like why aren't you the right? But it is fairer to go like issue by issue. But even, especially with the kind of the distinction of being libertarian right, I find that a very interesting one, because in my view, being on the right and being libertarian, which is kind of like pro-freedom, I'm not sure that they logically actually are consistent. But why don't we start with the role of government? Because I think that's a big thing that libertarians, because, you know, on that spectrum, the political compass, you know, you sent me that image, and a lot of people sort of take that when they start getting into politics, where they fit on that spectrum. And I'm often definitely on the left, and I fluctuate around closer to the libertarian end in terms of pro-freedom. But I think one of the big things about libertarians is what they see the role of government. I think they, especially if we just compare them to the current government, who is Labor and social democracy, big government spending is a big part of their policies and all of that. What do you see as the role of government as a libertarian right-winger?
Well, basically, they're just there to like enforce sort of our rights,
Okay.
and like to defend the nation, and to obviously there's certain services that business isn't very good at providing. Like, I understand that, like roads and public transport and things like that. So they have to provide those services as well. But it's just like, it's sort of like you're always erring. Like, I would rather that we always err on the side of not doing that whenever we can. Whereas it feels like, you know, a Labor Party would rather, you know, if some government, what's the word? Like institution or something like that can be set up to solve a problem, then they'll always do that. And I don't know, something about that just doesn't feel right to me. It's almost like you're not allowing the chance for, I guess, nature to just play its course and come up with a better solution than we could come up with.
Okay, so with rights, the government's role is broadly to protect people's rights, and you probably disagree with how. Do you think Labor agrees with that, or do you think Labor doesn't agree with that?
Well, I mean, they don't really agree with the right to free speech, so there's that. It depends on, yeah, I guess what you have to talk about what counts as rights there.
Yeah.
I don't think that you, like, some people say that you have a right to life. That doesn't really make sense to me. You don't have a right to life. A right is sort of like something that, I don't know, I guess something that the government isn't allowed to do, but it's not something that, like, yeah. Does that make sense?
A pretty basic one is like, what about something like for yourself? Because again, like, you disclose as much as you want about your personal situation, but like workers' rights, is that something the government should protect?
Like, not in a lot of cases that they do, I don't think. Like, I think that we, like, say, take the minimum wage, something like that. I don't see why, when you raise the minimum wage, you're raising the price of everything in the community. And so these people who are on the minimum wage, they feel great because they're getting a higher wage. But then when they go out to buy stuff, everything costs more because you're paying businesses who have to pay minimum wage to their employees. And the more you increase that minimum wage, the more the price of everything is going to go up. And so it sort of cancels itself out.
I get what you're getting to, sort of an economic argument, because let's just take it step by step. The raising the minimum wage doesn't increase the prices. I would imagine businesses may increase their prices to factor in that minimum wage. Is that fair? The minimum wage itself doesn't increase the price. It might it decreases the profit of the business if they don't raise their prices, but the businesses then choose to raise their prices. Yeah. No, like, for sure, the outcomes are probably that businesses raise their prices, but the minimum wage doesn't inherently do that.
Yeah, I guess I'm skipping skipping the steps in between, because I'm just saying that is what happens, and so you may as well just say that.
Yeah, and look, this is the key argument, that businesses have some people say businesses have rights too, or at least the business owners. This is kind of the whole conflict, one of the big conflicts, isn't it? Like the capital owners or the business owners versus the workers' rights. And if we have a workers' right, like minimum wage or increasing that minimum wage, is the argument that we shouldn't do it because then businesses will just raise the prices anyway.
Well, I don't know if you shouldn't do it. I guess like you'd want to really look through it and really make sure that you're getting it right. Like I know that there's a country, I think it may be Vietnam or something like that, where if you're under a certain amount of employees, you really don't have to follow any regulations at all beyond just not breaking laws that no one is allowed to break. You know, like you can't set up your business in the middle of a street or something and block all the traffic, just as something off the top of my head. So, I mean, maybe something like that would be good, where you have tiers of like the more employees or the more revenue that your business makes, the more you have to follow the regulations.
Yeah,
So
I didn't know
maybe
about that.
could work, or
I'll definitely look into that. So you said it might be Vietnam that has like almost a tiered system of, like
definitely
a certain
Southeast
definition
Asian.
of a small business doesn't have to follow certain regulations.
Yeah, definitely a Southeast Asian country.
Right. Do you have any
Yeah.
data on worker safety in those industries or anything like that that we could have a look into as well?
Well, I mean, it's you can't like convince someone to harm themselves. Like I can't do that to you right now under the law. You know what I mean? So it's
right, like legally you couldn't say what. Have you got an
tell
example?
someone, I don't know, if you use this toxic product, you're going to be fine, and then they use it and then they get sick from it. I'm pretty sure you're not allowed to do that. So I would just fall back on that as being just the law, which you're never allowed to break.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose we assume those countries have those laws in the first place.
They may not. So yeah.
Yeah, and look, I think this is a big thing. Look, because like I call myself the rightist leftist, and it's partly tongue in cheek, partly like making fun of those distinctions. But on the other hand, I do agree with, because I'm a small business. Like I am actually technically a business owner. If we do that capital labor thing, I'm kind of in the middle where I work at my own small business. So I do see both sides. Like I'm in that thing of it's a challenging competition of interests, like workers' rights and business rights. My view in Australia is that especially big businesses, if we're going to do like the tiered system, like multinational corporations like Coles and Woolies, sure, like there are laws and regulations and they're heavily regulated, but I do think the government is very favorable. And like talk about Amazon or all these other companies too. Do you agree with that? Are you on that kind of side of things? We can talk about it through right or left or however we want to label it, but do you agree that like multinational corporations have outsized influence in Australian politics?
Yeah, I think that when you have a really highly regulated environment, that lends itself to them benefiting from that, because it makes it harder for other businesses to come in and take the place, because they have the legal department to just deal with all of these laws, whereas when you're just a small or medium business, it's harder to do that. And so it really entrenches those monopolies. So yeah, what was your question? You asked like...
I see what you're getting at. So because of the regulatory environment, only big businesses are capable of surviving those regulations in a roundabout way. Is that the summary?
So I guess it's like, yeah, they do. The government does help these organizations, but a lot of it is through the regulations that everybody says is going to solve the problem. So
what about like price gouging?
I don't really understand that as an idea. They're saying that they're doing that with the fuel. Like to me, it's supply and demand. That's the price that they can get for it, because not even what they can get it for it, but because that's what they have to get for it. If they could sell it for cheaper, like one company would do that, and then they would make heaps of money because everyone would go to them. But that's not happening because no one can do that.
I think that's the thing that's where I start to disagree, because have you heard of the term greedflation? It was sort of coined, I don't know exactly who coined it, but it was used a lot during the COVID era, where companies were using some level of real inflation to raise their prices. And because it's hard, it's very hard to tease out, to sort of go, why does a McDonald's burger cost $15 or whatever, a Big Mac meal? Why does it cost that much? It's very hard to tease out the exact pie chart of where the cost comes from. But what they were finding was that these companies, especially through COVID, a lot of them, and in Australia too, were not really doing it tough. We're making huge profits. And then billionaire, like people that shareholders and owners were doing really well. And that's why they call that the K-shaped recovery. The people that the ownership class got way richer over COVID, and workers and people that were sort of at the bottom, and I mean that by like income or asset level, did really poorly, and so many of them are struggling to recover. Do you agree that businesses may exploit? You don't think they would exploit a crisis and raise prices if they all get together? And I know they're not allowed to do it, but who says that they don't?
All it would take is for one business to not do that, and then everyone would go to them. So I sort of feel like maybe they've all, maybe in that sort of scenario, they've all independently recognized that something about this crisis is making us realize that the future is uncertain and we really need to increase our profits right now, and, you know, whatever it is, invest those profits into like long-term security for our business. Maybe they've all independently realized that. Maybe that's what they're doing. That's what I think that they're probably doing right now with the fuel crisis, because a lot of them, they're still able to get the fuel, I think, but they're increasing the price because they're recognizing that in the future, there's a very high chance in a month's time that they're not going to be selling any petrol at all. And so they've all recognized independently that they have to increase their prices.
Yeah, that's true. Like if you look industry wide, another example is like landlords with renting. Like are you in? I don't even confirm what state. Are you in Victoria like me?
Queensland.
Okay, Queensland. So I don't know Queensland's laws around this. They might be a bit different. But in Victoria, with rental increases, it can only be done once a year. There isn't really a percentage limit. So it can't be like 3.5% or inflation or whatever. But the way it works is like it has to be sort of to the market. And what sort of happens is, let's just take a random suburb. I can't even think of one. But like, you know, like let's say like Dandenong, you can have a look at the prices around. And if everyone is increasing the price, then suddenly the market value goes up. And so this is my wording. I think that's a bit like a cartel, where it's like maybe they're not directly talking with each other and being illegal because, you know, they're not allowed in Australian consumer law. Companies are not allowed to collude on prices. But it's just saying like this, they independently come to it. Look, and we know at the end of the day, like they're for-profit businesses, they're capital, they're trying to make money. But I think the whole point of where my political thing is, on what I think the role of the government is to protect the people. And so if prices companies are making record profits, like the bank, like let's not even go into the banks, but we could cover that too. And then people are struggling, and I mean really struggling, and we'll get to like social welfare and all that soon. But like, I get what you're saying is like, okay, there could be this like independent fuel or independent gas station that decides to lower the prices and everyone's going to go there. But that's in theory. Yes, I know that's economic theory, but in practice, it's really not how it works, is it? Like with Coles and Woolies, they do things like, you know, shopping centers now, the way they're built is it's like they're built around the Woolworths or the Coles. You know, I don't know. I'm like near a new estate, and that's the way they do it. It's like Woolworths and then all the little shops around there. There was, I'm going to get the name wrong, but there was that German shopping center that tried to come in, and they were like, no, Aldi's here, but Aldi's actually a pretty good example of that. But there was so many other like international ones. Maybe it wasn't German, but they came in and they realized
was it legal?
Something like that, yeah. And they just realized it wasn't worth it. And so it's like the idea of starting, if like you say you or me, we wanted to just go into business and start a supermarket. Sure, there are regulations, of course, but we can't compete with Coles and Woolies and the way that they operate with the land banking. You know, they literally hold land. So, there's like this space could be titled for like a shopping center, and they'll just hold the land so no one can set up shop near them. So I get in economic theory that, okay, you start a business, you have a lower price and people will come to you. And that's where prices come from, because businesses have to be competitive. But when it really plays out, this is like this is why the game board monopoly existed as a warning for this. If you don't have regulation and a government that can see when things are getting outpaced, you get what is sort of happening in oligarchic countries like Russia or the US, where it's like a few corporations have outsized control. And sure, you could say on paper, yeah, you just start your competing business, but it doesn't I mean, Do you think is this where we disagree? Am I wrong?
Like, you're right, but I think that there are like alternatives. Like there's just like a no-name grocery store sort of half an hour's drive from me, and it's like on a corner where no one would go, but because of the internet, or maybe you're just driving around and you drive past it, you see that it's there, and you just go there rather than going to the shopping center.
Yeah, like a convenience store.
No, it's a
Like
full-on grocery store.
Okay, all right.
And it's it's cheaper, and it's like I don't know, like there is a cultural thing of like everybody has to go to the supermarket to the shopping center. But you don't have to go there. You can go to some place that's just on the corner of the road in the middle of, somewhere which isn't as attractive as a location.
Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying. And we have an IGA down the road similar to that. Like it's kind of
IGA has ridiculous prices though.
Yeah, I was just about to say that. Yeah, and you're 100% right. There are like individual examples in towns and things where there are these kind of mum and pop or individual stores where they're not part of a chain like that. I think that's the thing though, is it's the way I'm looking at it is where it's headed. Like right now, maybe that can still happen. But if we look year over year, like 10 years ago, market concentration wasn't as bad. And so every year that goes on, it's getting worse and worse. And then that leads to, the movie WALL-E, where it's like just one corporation owns everything. It's like everyone's up in the. I know it's like a future projection, so it's not necessarily accurate. But the idea is that, do we really want one corporation in charge of everything? Because that is really the problem with monopolies. Is when people go, yeah, sure, like prices will go down, but the main problem with a monopoly is if one business literally has 100% market share, they pretty much have 100% control, unless there's a government that's willing to do something about it. And do we really want that? Like we're talking about freedom, right? Corporate control I think limits citizens' freedom if we only have one choice of where to shop.
Yeah, I just don't think that like would happen. Maybe it could happen in certain, I don't know. You want to look at like particular, not industries, but particular, I guess, industries, which are just like where the national security on that particular industry is so important. Like oil refineries, how they shut all those down, and it's like, now we're looking back on that and we're wondering maybe we should have kept them up, even though sort of the economics of it, if you were being a libertarian, would have said to shut them all down. I think that was sort of part of the argument at the time. But in that particular case, it's so important to our security that really we should be keeping them open. So there's certain industries like that.
Yeah, you're right. They weren't profitable. The last few were being subsidized by the government. And I don't think, you said it, libertarians don't favor that. So
well, I said
you as a libertarian going against your libertarian friends, saying the government maybe should have kept them open.
Yes. Before I said like, it's when you err on the side of libertarian. And when it's not an option, security is more important.
So I do have an issue with that as a philosophy. This is my I'll give it to you. This is my issue with libertarianism. Is it's like you can't have a personal philosophy. Well, maybe you can. I don't believe you can have a personal philosophy, but then like apply it when it's convenient. A philosophy should be consistent across everything. Or if you have a really good reason. But the thing is, this is what I find with libertarianism is like it starts to fall apart in almost every area that you go into, because you're basically saying the government should have kept open these non-profitable. I agree, and this is why I think the social democracy, the Nordic model, is consistent, because in that thing, the government's role is to protect the people. So it's entirely logically consistent to keep these oil refineries open because we may need them. So businesses go, oh, it's not profitable now, or it's costing us. There was the one, I think it was the one in Western Australia or South Australia, needed this huge upgrade and repair, and no businesses wanted to pay for it. Fair enough. But now look what the problem we're in, because they didn't plan ahead. So this is when you say that corporations plan ahead. They plan ahead for things they think are going to be profitable. They don't necessarily plan ahead to help the people, if we're being very honest. They help themselves. And that's exactly why a business's job is, because people think I'm anti-business. I fully understand why Coles and Woolies try and get all the market share. Like that's their role. They're trying to make
Yeah.
as much profit for their shareholders as they can. And that's fine to a point. But when it gets to a level where they're getting outsized control and influence, or people are getting harmed, like the companies that decided it wasn't profitable, and for the right reason, it wasn't profitable. But then libertarians go, okay, but in this case, we won't be libertarian on this and let the government keep it going because we might get into a fuel crisis.
So libertarianism to me isn't a philosophy; it's a political project or a political. It's sort of like saying that labor, that labor is a philosophy.
Labor's in their constitution is social democracy is their underpinning philosophy. Now, people say that they've moved away from it. Look at my videos for my criticism of Labor. I'm not going to be a Labor defender here. But so libertarian is not a philosophy, it's a political project.
In my opinion,
so what's the aim of the project?
It's like, I guess you'd say, like, when you're talking about a political ideology, or not even an ideology, a project, I think is probably the best word.
Yeah, well, in a project you have like aims. So what's the aim of libertarianism?
Well, the aim is like freedom, like when you can. But if you're dead, then you're not going to be free. So like security is more important than freedom. But you, like any opportunity where you can choose freedom over security, you very enthusiastically choose the freedom option.
So yeah, okay.
And I mean security in a national sense. Like, I don't mean, like 0.5% of the population might be hurt by us not putting this rule in place. Okay. So I'm talking about if something is really going to destroy the whole system, then we might need to think about having a strong rule. And it's because it's a political project is like, it's bringing together psychology and like nationalism and all of these different things and trying to make something that works. And I just think that what I'm talking about is what works the best. And also it's the world I want to live in as well. So part of it is like an emotional desire, really.
There's a clash between security and freedom a lot of the time. And so libertarians will always choose freedom unless they need to choose security over that in dire circumstances.
I think so. Yeah, I think that's how it should be.
But you then said the libertarians, you disagree with the libertarians about that because those refineries weren't profitable, that they were in support of shutting them down. So this is the problem: is forward thinking.
Yeah,
the forward thinking of that. It's like, well, now we need them for security, but back then for freedom, I guess the argument was we don't want government money going to that. And so that's where I find it's hard to. Yes, you're right. You got to balance freedom with security, and we can talk about internet security or privacy and stuff like that, which is a whole other thing. But what's the libertarian project where it's like, oh well, we've shut them down now; it's too late. You can't just bring them back. We've only got two left.
It requires a bit of foresight, which they could have had. Like, that we import a lot of our oil, and that it comes through these choke points, which are like really, issues of what's the word? Military flashpoints sort of thing.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So they could have foreseen it. So in that case, you would definitely choose the security option. I ran the world.
So is the threshold like you said before, is it kind of a utilitarian, like it's sort of about the amounts of people that are at risk from a decision? Like at what point do you cross it over from valuing people's freedom to like, okay, no, we need to limit people's freedom for this security?
It's security of like the nation as a whole. So
okay. So like something like a fuel crisis that affects pretty much everyone.
If this keeps going, it could just make Australia no longer a viable thing. And so then it's like, what's the point?
What do libertarians feel about Trump?
Well, he's not really. He's quite authoritarian. He's definitely.
He got booed at the Libertarian convention. Have you seen that video?
No.
I'll link it in the description. It's he tried to, because they get about 3% of the vote in America, I believe, or something like that, 2 to 3%, and he went to their convention to court their vote, and they booed him.
Yeah. A lot of libertarians don't like like the Israel thing. That's probably a big part of it. So they don't want they don't like the control of that lobby sort of thing. So it's, a lot of libertarians, like the Libertarian Party in Australia, one of the guys, I can't remember what his name was, but he said, I went to both protests. I went to the I don't even know if I don't want to say trigger words on your channel.
I'll bleep him if I need to.
Okay, all right.
What's the-
So the pro-Palestine protest, so ridiculous. I need to even worry about that. But
yeah, that's fine. It's not going to get blocked.
Yeah. And the others, and the lower immigration protest. He was like, I went to both of them. And most libertarians that I know, they're sort of like, we want lower immigration, and we also are not in love with what Israel's doing. And certainly, at the very least, we don't want to be supporting it because it hurts us as well. So yeah. That's probably why they don't like Trump. And that worries me a lot with Pauline Hanson as well. I assume that she's going to go down the same path if she is voted in.
I mean, I know, so Libertarians actually, you mentioned it, which is great. We can link to that too if you're involved with that. The Libertarian Party of Australia, they're separate to the bigger parties. But what do they think? Because obviously you're talking about immigration and lowering immigration, which is the forefront of One Nation's policy. But as you said too, Pauline Hanson's very pro-Trump, and I guess by definition or by association pro-Israel. Yeah. How do the Libertarians think about Pauline? Is One Nation, and you don't speak for all of them. You could even just speak for yourself if you want. But is the appeal of One Nation there for freedom and all of that? Is that what they stand for?
They generally put them before Labor and Liberal.
Right. Okay.
They have a lot of issues. I know that. Do you know Gerard Rennick, People First?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
He doesn't call himself a libertarian, but he sort of is in that space.
He's in that field, in that zone. Yeah.
So he said he didn't like that, something about the way that One Nation runs its internal democracy, something to do with having branches or something like that. She didn't want to have branches in all the different areas. I think the idea is it was much more of a top-down type organization before.
Yeah.
Whereas he wanted to make People First more of a grassroots thing. And then that actually sort of was part of what pressured Pauline and One Nation to actually do that. So, they sort of they're One Nation curious, but they really want to make sure that it is not, it doesn't end up becoming this totalitarian, really authoritarian thing, which it has the potential to become that.
I think immigration, we'll talk about that because that was most of one of our exchanges. I've got some of the comments so we don't misquote each other and ourselves. I think the one thing with One Nation that I feel is that their underlying immigration's up front and center, and they associate it with the cost of living, and I can see that's partly true. There's much more complexity to it than that, but they underlying have some quite, I feel, very anti-libertarian policies that really limit Australians' freedoms when you really get into the nitty-gritty of it. Because Pauline Hanson, first of all, barely her voting record is 53% attendance at votes, so she's pretty checked out anyway, it seems. But at the time she does vote, she strongly votes against workers' rights. Pretty much any industrial policy that Labor's put forward, she's voted against. She's voted against, one that sort of slips by that now that it's been voted down, people don't want to talk about, but the right to disconnect from work. For people watching, it might not be feeling that's, your boss can't harass you outside of work hours. Now, I know their argument is it's for small businesses, but, I think there are some policies where there's a reasonable argument to be made, and then other ones where it's I can't find an angle to look at that as how does that not limit a worker's freedom? Because everyone talks about freedom, especially libertarians, it's freedom from government tyranny or freedom from the government telling you what to do. But what about business and corporate tyranny where your boss can sort of control your life? And, we can get to that with the immigrants and visas, because one of the disagreements was about are immigrant, I guess we're saying, is it punching down or not to be critical of immigration? because of precarious situations. Because power and control isn't just the government. Like, would you concede that point? It's not just the government telling what people's freedoms can be limited in other ways than just the government. Can we at least agree on that?
Yeah, and in the family too.
Well, yeah, well, many social and situational contexts.
I guess I'd say the government is totalizing in its power and has no limits on its reach for where it can control you. Whereas the other things, families, businesses, you can have some wiggle room and find somewhere else or leave that space.
So how free should people be then? Can people make whatever decisions they want in their life for their own, like if they're not harming people, could I decide to do or not do whatever I wanted?
Well, yeah, you can do something that's you can make a choice to limit your own freedom as well. You know?
Okay. So I just want to show up an image. This was the first time I learned about your channel commenting on me. I don't know if it might be a bit small, but it says this was you commenting about, I think it was my video with my friend Ethan. You said brush your teeth. Yeah. I thought that was, I will say the caterpillar is very
your teeth look fine.
I thought you were a boomer commenting, so I kind of sarcastically replied like I do. And then you said, so why should you pay for people who don't? Then one of my other commenters, they said teeth issues happen even if you do. And then I said, oh, it's a logic trap. We pay for treatment of smokers who get lung cancer though, don't we? And then you said we also tax the F out of cigarettes. Maybe free dental could come alongside a sugar tax. I'd give free dental to under 16s or under 18s because it was around the topic of dental on Medicare. So that's a little judgmental of people who choose not to brush their teeth, is it not?
No, but you're choosing to not brush your teeth and then you're accepting the consequences that come with that. We're not freeing you from we're not freeing you from the tyranny of nature. You know? So
it's more about the government shouldn't so my framing of why I think dental on Medicare, social democracy about government protecting people. I don't know the exact percentage, but most dental items, if you go to the dentist, is a checkup. You would, I guess, agree. Most people go to a checkup, even if they have healthy teeth. You get a checkup and go, everything's good.
Yeah, or a clean.
And the second one's a scraping, which makes your teeth healthier when you're there. They go a bit deeper and clean you out. So the main two are actually preventative dental, which I think would in turn, because dental can get serious. People don't think about this, but people can have heart problems from their gums. Like this is the thing where people with dental in particular don't realize the other health impacts it can have if people don't do that preventative. And look, I agree with you. People should brush their teeth. I brush my teeth. I hope you clearly brush your teeth if you're judging people who don't. But do we really, is this so the government sort of like cuts people off for their behavioral choices?
It's not cutting people off. It's like, are you going to choose to help someone or not? And are you going to ask, everybody to pay to help that person or not? So
I think we should.
That's the different way of thinking about it. So I think
we should. Yeah. You don't think we should?
Well, as I said, if you want to do it, then we should have a sugar tax. You said not against a sugar tax. For me, it's like they both need to come
up against
together.
Big Sugar, though. You're in Queensland, right? Big Sugar is like, you in far north Queensland. Like I go up to Cairns and Port Douglas. Like it's just sugar canes everywhere. You think the sugar cane lobby is going to go after you for that? I mean, I'm happy to see. I said I'm happy to go up against big business.
But I think we could do a sugar tax. It's a sugar tax and free dental together. You can't have one or the other without the other. They both have to come together.
I'm okay with that.
But
that's not very libertarian, though, to add a tax.
It's not libertarian, but this is a compromise I'm making. It's like, okay, if everyone wants to do free dental, fine. We've got to pay for it with a sugar tax, though. And then you get the people who are generating the problem being the ones paying for it, as opposed to the people that aren't generating the problem, which is slightly more libertarian than let's all pay for it.
See, so libertarian is on a scale, obviously, like it's slightly.
That's me making a compromise.
Yeah.
That's not how. So that's not ideal.
But I guess it's really essentially not behavioral control, but behavioral modification. Where you're right, they do it with cigarettes. It's like you raise the levy or the fee on them, so the users of it pay more into the system on the back end of having to be treated for it. That's kind of so it's like we'll kind of inadvertently control people through making them pay more for things like sugar.
it just makes the economics of it make more sense. So if this thing increases, then this thing also increases, and then hopefully both of them will then come down. The sugar consumption and the tooth decay, So then those two things are then linked to each other.
Okay.
In sort of the government's tax system, or the whole government system.
But it's not that libertarian to suggest a tax, though. I thought libertarians, and it is a spectrum, and most of them don't like taxes.
I would prefer that you just don't have free dental and you don't have a sugar tax. That would be my preferred situation. But if everybody wants there to be free dental, okay, but I want to make sure that there's a sugar tax as well, if that's what everyone's deciding.
Yeah, in a society though, like we go to the lung cancer example, do you think smoking should be banned, or do you think people should have the freedom to smoke, but they shouldn't then? Well, I guess we have the levy or the tax, so if you think that offsets it, but there needs to be some kind of like, you don't want the healthy people to be paying for the unhealthy people, or the people that choose to be healthier.
Yeah, because I like obsess over my health. I'm so like I read the labels on everything. Like that's the kind of government regulation that I really like. Well, I guess it goes in contrast with my thing I was talking about before, where if you have how that affects small business. But I like when you've got a government regulation which provides information to people, and then they actually have the chance to make the choice themselves. So when I read the label on the back of everything, I'm keeping everything within the daily limit, and like then I'm having to pay 10% GST on everything. I know the GST has a specific avenue where it goes into, which isn't necessarily going into healthcare, but if it wasn't going into, like, the fact that it's able to go into that means that money from somewhere else, from some other part of the tax system, doesn't have to go into that. So it's kind of like, you may as well just consider that all taxes are just going into this common pool, which is being spent on everything.
Yeah.
So like, I just don't like the fact that I'm spending so much effort thinking about my own health and other people aren't, and then I'm having to pay money for that. And everything's so expensive. It's just like, yeah.
I get this is the right-wing logic, and that's why I say I'm the rightist leftist. I understand the concept of individual responsibility. Where it falls apart for me is like at who gets to decide, like at what point. Again, it's a similar thing to the security versus freedom. Someone likes to snowboard, okay, they break their leg. All right, well, we have Medicare, but should Medicare not cover a broken leg because they chose to snowboard, which we know is an extreme sport with higher risk? People who tailgate, someone, they cause a car accident, TAC covers that. All motorists pay into that, even if we're safe drivers. It is annoying. I get you that people make poor life choices, and we would like people to make the life choices that we would make. But is the levers of government and who gets funding and who doesn't really the solution? I actually don't even, like, I'll be honest with you, I don't think it even changes the behavior. Smokers still smoke, drinkers still drink. People who like sugar, like, how high are you going to rise the prices? Like, sugar's so cheap. It's like you can get a thing of lollies for like a few bucks at the store. So what sugar tax is going to, like a 10% sugar tax, it's going to be $3.30. Is that going to stop people who are addicted to sugar? And, all the stuff that sugar gets put into that we don't even have a choice. There's that website and you can see the stuff that has sugar added. And there's so many stuff I didn't even know. And I consider myself moderately healthy, probably not as healthy as yourself, but I like to take care of my health. But the fact that I found out how much sugar is in so many things I didn't even know, I look, education is one of the keys. You have 100% agree with you on that. Like, the government should be informing people to make healthy choices, et cetera, et cetera. But do you like, maybe you don't agree, but do you see my point of view on the argument of like, sometimes this is where like these risk, insurance is pretty much, especially health insurance, is younger people paying for the older people, really, because the older people are the ones that are really getting sick and the chronic illnesses and all that. Or like it's a system where the younger people buy into it because they know when they're going to be older, those younger people are going to buy into it. It's like Social Security in the US is similar to, you pay into it and then you get paid out later. is that not just what living in a society is? You know, some people make poor decisions, and sure, like it feels good, or it might feel morally just to sort of cut off their funding and support. But if we want to be a society where everyone's included, and like on dental, where most of it's preventative, again, look, sure, let's chuck the sugar tax in as well. But see, that's where I think that's more cohesive of a society to, you know, include people in, even if they're not making the best choices for whatever reason. I mean, I feel like that's what libertarianism really is.
I think that unfortunately, this type of thinking is what is leading to the decline.
All right.
And
How? No, I'm interested to hear. Genuine. I'm not going to roast you.
Look
I want to
at
hear it.
the aging population and how like all the young people have to work to support the aging population. And so to the point where we can't even make more babies because we're so, you know, because we're working so hard and because, you know, I don't know, whatever it is, it's sort of like there's just no room to really expand ourselves in that way. And so that's why we're bringing in such high levels of immigration to support that. It sucks, but that is what's happening. It's because we're all supporting them that's the reason why.
My grandma watches the show. What are you proposing we do to the old people before we get to immigration? What's the solution to old people?
Well, I mean, maybe we don't really like people used to like sort of live nearby to their grandparents and they would look after them individually a lot more. Okay,
some people still do that. Do you mean on? I think this is the thing. We're going to show a couple of these things, but I think sometimes with your comments, I really want to be clear because you talked about the individual store as well. Do you mean that when you say like people should live with their like old? So it sounds like you're an individual responsibility. That it's like they're old, so the families are responsible for them, not the pension or the government or superannuation. Do you mean that do you take that to mean like everyone in society should be doing the same thing? Like all old people should be like everyone needs to live close to their elderly family members and not have some kind of government support?
They shouldn't. Well, I'm just saying that would be that would be what I would assume would then happen if we were then to have less government support for the elderly people.
But wouldn't that take time away from our critical work years of like having to go out and you say, it's hard enough. We're probably relatively the same age, having to go out and work for a living and all that. Having an old person to take care of, really? No, not some kind of like. I think the aged care system's got many problems, but at least there is support there for old people. And the NDIS, that's more for not necessarily for older people, but that's again social democracy, having this well-funded social safety, because a lot of older people do get to retirement age and don't have a property, and that's becoming more in common, or don't have the funds. So are you saying it's working people like us should take time out of our already stressful, busy lives to look after them?
Well, that's what we're already doing. You just, instead of doing that work directly looking after the grandparents, you're instead working 20% harder at your job to support everybody's grandparents. So
aged care is not just like they're putting them in front of a TV. Like you need nurses, you need aged care workers are not just babysitting. You have to have a degree for that. And then we've got immigration. Aussies aren't really doing aged care jobs, to be honest with you.
I don't see how.
Are we going to then just take all that on? It's not plopping in front of Fox News all day, looking after an old person.
I don't know. I sort of lost my train of thought. I think that if families were doing it, it's a lot more efficient in terms of cost, because than what we're currently doing. And because the person, and it's like the sort of care that you're able to provide is like tailor-made for them, and it's like, does that make sense?
Do you know how to work the medication and how to work with someone with dementia, as an example?
Well, I don't.
What you actually need to do day to day.
I've grown up in the current system, so but this is what people used to do.
And then this system came about because it didn't really work. I think that's the thing. Like aged care is a
came about because I think it was like people were sort of like, it's such an attractive idea to just free you from the sort of the bounds that nature places on you, and it's just, you just can't be freed from that. Does that make sense?
But if I want freedom, if I want the freedom to, like, especially elder people too, like a lot of them do resist going to aged care. They don't even want their family to look after them. They want to live in their own home. That happened with my own grandfather, like died in his home because he refused to go into aged care. But the thing is, I think what we're getting caught up on, let's keep it back to politics, is like that your system is that working age adults should take care of their elderly people in kind of a community. Like you're kind of talking about, you're right. Like some, especially like Asian cultures do, they might have at-home care. So you're right. Maybe they don't do the complex tasks. They'll have people come there and do it, but it still needs to be funded, I guess is what I'm getting at. Is like where I get frustrated by the libertarians is like, they want to tear apart the system. Oh, aged care is too expensive. Well, what's the alternative? And when you get to the end of it, it's never less expensive actually, because there's costs to the economy in other ways, like taking working people out of their professions to have to look after people is just not viable for most people.
It would be.
I don't know if you're a parent. I'm a parent. I've got to look after a kid as well. I'm not looking after an older person. Sorry, Grandma.
Yeah. It would be an industry, you know.
But it's already an industry. This is the thing. So you want to get rid of an industry to make another industry, and there's already privatization in it too. So the pro-business people get profit as well. So that's where
there would be an industry of like people coming around to your house to do the things
that happens.
You can't do.
Bolton, look up Bolton Clark. It's like the biggest nursing agency. They do that already.
Use that.
That happens all the time.
But I don't see why. I know, but then right now it's being paid for by taxes.
Not all the time. Not all
or
the time.
Or it's being subsidized by taxes.
But what's wrong with that when we will eventually get to use it too? We don't use it now, but that's what a society is, the trade-offs. You know, I don't smoke, but I know that a lot of my money goes to people with lung cancer, because I mean, there are people with lung cancer that get it from not smoking too. But I also know that, yeah, like I'd prefer people not to smoke, but
what's wrong with it is that it's leading to the aging population, and that it's leading to this situation where we're like disappearing and we're not even going to have a country anymore, or like just not even going to exist anymore. That's
a very Trumpian line. We're not going to have a country anymore. I think we'll still have a country. Like Australia's going to be here.
What is Australia though? You know, like what is that?
Well, a land, like physically it's a country. People are going to live in it.
It's not the land, because there was a time, you know, in 1600s where Australia didn't exist, but the land was still here.
Oh, well, like the name Australia, yes, sure. But I guess what I mean is like the aging population is much more related to medical advancements that are keeping people alive for longer than anything else. I mean, I'm not going to go the dark route, but you're not saying they should die earlier. Like we should have a less aging population by less old people.
Do I want to die earlier?
Or just that's one solution.
That my children can have a future.
So yes.
You know, yes, I want to die earlier if it would mean that my children can have a future.
Okay. But people would have the freedom to keep so that's your choice. But should people have the freedom to keep living longer if they want to?
If they can, and if they want to, yeah.
All right, let's go to the comment.
If I can and if I want to, then yes, I will do that. But yeah.
So I just wanted to let's cover off the immigration before we finish. So I actually agree with you. So you said this was a comment that got us talking back and forth. I've got all the replies that we can go through. So you sort of said 300,000 immigrants per year. I don't hate the immigrants. I hate the policy. 100,000 immigrants per year. I still don't hate the immigrants, and I no longer hate the policy. So can we just stop with the word games, destroying our ability to have an adult conversation? All right, check in first of all. Do you feel like we're having an adult conversation now? Am I giving you the chance to speak? Or am I railroading you, steamrolling you?
Yes, no. And also this was, you know, I sort of realized afterwards that you were sort of saying that as a throwaway comment, but everybody says attacking immigrants. And I just don't really like that framing, because it's kind of dishonest. But I don't think that's what you were saying specifically, that there are people who do attack immigrants, and that was really your problem.
I mean, let's be really honest with one
rhetorically.
They're not all racist. There's a contingency of those people that definitely hate immigrants, though. Or they see a brown person, they go, yucky.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm not saying that you're that or that they're all that, but we don't want to, like, you know, we're going to be fully honest. There is those kinds of people in society.
Yeah.
But let's have a real conversation about immigration. So I just did some follow up. That was something about you talked about people first. A few other people jumped in, so I'll get off that. Get to where we sort of went back and forward. So yeah, look. So my whole point, I talked about that, just giving it so people can all see it. Most of the immigrants are international students or skilled workers. There's also, you know, yes, family visas and things like that. But I agree with you, like the low birth rates in Australia, you know, like a lot of my friends in their early 30s are opting out of having kids because of the cost of living and all of that. And yeah, we've got the case study of negative migration, which was COVID times. Rents did, I'll concede on one of your points. I'll be fair to you and all that. The rents did go down. You mentioned Canada as a case study. I don't have the data on that, on how much rent actually went down in Canada. You might have that to let the audience know, but I know it did marginally go down as that sort of economy went into a shock with a lot of immigrants going home. But I think with the cost of living, it's much more related to many other factors than just immigration. Like, do you agree with that? Or are you one of those people where it's like, we get that immigration number down and then everything's back to normal?
I think it's probably the biggest thing right now. It's like the biggest thing, and it's, well, I want to say it's the easiest thing. I think it probably is the easiest thing because it's like,
So why do the immigrants come here?
I don't know. Like, I think that they come here because they see images of Western lifestyle in the media, and they think that it looks great, and they want to be part of that. And I think that it's a lie, really. I don't think that they end up getting what they want.
What do they end up
I know
getting?
that's not what most people say. Most people probably would say that it's because for sort of more economic opportunities and things like that. But I don't think that that's what drives, I don't know. Like, I just think that there's a much more human thing behind it. It's like, I want to be on a Friends episode, you know? That's what.
Yeah, I would say that, you know, the income probably is part of that fantasy. That
when I say that, I mean, like, I want to be like metaphorically living as if I'm in the Friends show. You know that show from the 90s?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm familiar.
That's sort of what. Yeah.
Yeah, they have a bit of a fantasy or an idea of what Australia's like,
Yeah.
and that's probably better than the situation they're coming from.
Yeah, but I don't think that. I think it's sort of a fantasy. It's like a fantasy, as in, like, it's not actually realistic. It's not actually what they end up getting.
What do they end up getting?
They end up getting that they're not actually integrated into this society, and that they actually, it's not what they thought it was like either. That actually it's a lot of rat race and struggle, and yeah, they don't actually.
So it's just life. It's just real life.
It continues, and it's probably a little bit harder than it was at home.
So, do you see immigrants as a monolith like that? That they all don't integrate and they all don't. They all get stuck.
I would say that's the general experience for them when they come here. Is that
what data or like what metric? What could you provide me to prove that I'd be convinced? Because I don't agree with that at all.
Yeah, I wouldn't be able to.
So it's just a belief without much evidence?
Well, it's me seeing.
You consume media. Do you consume media?
I consume media, and I look at stuff in the real world with my eyes.
Okay, so you've seen people
combine those two things together.
So you've seen immigrants not immigrating,
well,
not assimilating.
If you look at like friend groups, they tend to be like still separated by like what your background is. I mean, you have mixed friend groups, sure, but like most friend groups are like.
But do you have data on that? Like psychological research from Australia?
Oh, well, I mean, I do. No, I think that is a thing. I think that's been shown with
Can I see it?
No,
can I see it?
I don't. No, you can't see it. I'm not showing you. No, I don't. I don't have it off the top of my head, but I have.
It's anecdotal. Can we look? Let's just I'm not going to
It's
try and
anecdotal
trip you
for
up here, but
me,
it's anecdotal
but it
evidence,
is
right?
also like, I do believe that it's been confirmed by studies that like people tend to have friend groups within their own
But
background.
could you give me like something to type in? I've got Google right in front of me. I'll find the study and I will. This is the thing. I'll be fair. I will put it up for the audience to see that immigrants in Australia in general do not assimilate.
I doubt you'd have something from Australia.
But you're talking about this is the thing, right? So look, so
But
we'll
why
go to
would
the
we-
final comment. So this was a kind of your final. I didn't realize you commented this after. So I apologize for not responding. I'm not rude like that. Actually, this goes a bit off tangent to immigration. But I guess you're saying, you know, it's used as a threat against Aussies. Who's threatening Aussies with immigration? Just so I'm clear.
It's the threat that we're just going to, like, the people who were here in say year 2000 and their and their descendants are going to become the minority, as in like they're going to be less than 50% of the population. That's the threat.
So like white Australia policy, that we should have white people back in the majority.
White Australia policy was like nobody who is not from Europe or North America is allowed here. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying like that's not what I'm advocating for.
Well, what do you have? I'm confused.
The other thing is like it's not just like I wouldn't be really okay with like 5 million British people moving here tomorrow either. It would have the same effect.
Yeah,
you know, I think
I'm
a lot of
not
people
dividing up
actually
by
who think-
races.
I think a lot
you're
of people
saying
who think a lot of people who wish that they had the White Australia policy back, they don't realize that if this country was swamped by Americans or swamped by British people, they wouldn't be happy with that either, and they just don't realize that. So yeah.
So what's the threat of immigration though? I'm still not clear. Like, what's the actual threat?
Well, the threat is as that we're going to like be the minority.
But
like, does that make sense?
So my wife's an immigrant, right? And just got citizenship. Is she an Aussie now that she's got citizenship or no?
I don't really think so, no. But
she's got a citizenship. She's legally a citizen.
She's
my
Australian.
Great grandparents great grandparents of my grandparents came from England. So am I a citizen though?
Your great grandparents?
Great, like my grandparents' great grandparents. So like 5 generations removed came from England.
Well, yeah, because that was who created Australia. So,
but then
Australia
you come here and you do
really
your visa conditions and get your citizenship legal document, not considered Australian.
Well, no, I guess you could say you're an Australian citizen, but are you an Aussie? I don't really.
Yeah, I think my wife is an Aussie. Why would my wife not be an Aussie? What makes why would she? She really appreciates Australian values and customs. Loves it. Would never go back to her home country.
I just don't think that that's what that word means, and it's not to say that they're less than, or that it's a bad thing, or that they don't belong here. Those are all different things to say, and I'm not saying that. I'm saying that I just don't think that that's in the same way like that I wouldn't be Indian if I moved to India.
I think, well, some countries don't have, you're right. Well, some countries don't have that system where you could ever become a citizen of that country. But that's not what we have in Australia. People can become an Australian citizen. And part of that is even our local member goes to the citizenship ceremony, and he's a Liberal man, one of the last ones left in Victoria. And it's like, congratulations on becoming an Australian. Like, that's literally the message that they get from even like a right-wing politician, is like, now you're part of being Australian. And citizens and people that have done, spent thousands of dollars, paid taxes, contributed to the economy, built a network here, learned the language, fluent in the language. I mean, what point do they, what's like you have to be born? Is that what it is? You just have to come out of a vagina. Sorry for the graphic language, but on Australia, that's the only way you're Australian. You come out of a vagina in Australia.
I would say you'd have to come out of a few, which is so weird to say that. You'd have to be a few generations.
But what's the generational difference? Because I know so many Aussies, right, that I wouldn't consider Aussie in this cultural language. Violent murderers, offenders, sex offenders, the guy that abuse all
is
those
being
children in
Aussie,
Victorian
like,
childcare centers. He's a citizen. I don't think that's the Australian way. He's abusing kids the Australian way.
I don't see why it's not a reward to be called an Aussie.
No, but you're talking about
reward
Aussie.
for
You
being
said
good.
Aussie is, you're trying to define Aussie as like not a cultural thing. I'm taking it sounds like a cultural thing because you're sort of saying like legally being an Australian citizen doesn't make you Aussie. So I guess like what makes you Aussie? Because white Aussie Australian guys that are here, I don't think a lot of them live to Australian values and culture.
Yeah, but they're just like crappy people, but they're still Aussie. It doesn't mean that they're not that anymore. I'm sort of
But what
using
makes
that
them
word.
Aussie though? That they were born here. That's what it is. That's what I'm just saying. It's just that they were born here. That's it.
It's just like an ancestral thing. Yeah, it's like just what you are. It's like, I don't know. Yeah, I don't see why it's seen as a reward for being good. It's not what it is.
No, it's just it's a legal process to get a visa
label.
and come to Australia.
It's a descriptive label that you put on someone for saying that they are this or not. It's like saying you're not. Yeah, it's like saying someone's no longer tall because they, killed someone. It's just like, no, that's just what they are. They're still tall.
Okay, so Aussie is kind of a state of mind, like a label.
It's just a descriptor. It's a descriptor, yeah.
Okay, but then what's the relevance of, so when it comes to immigrants though, like what does it matter if it's just a descriptor? What does it matter if they're Aussie or not?
What do you mean? What does it matter?
So let me rephrase. I don't disagree with you, but you want immigration to come down?
Yes.
What level? So are you saying 100,000? Like, what's your number?
I don't necessarily know, but
that's pretty important because you
at
have to set it. I know you're not the government, but it'd be nice to have a number.
They talk about 100,000 because that's sort of what it's always been. So I guess going back to the status quo is usually a good place to start when things are going wrong.
Yeah. My number that I've said, I think 135,000 is pretty fair. Would you be okay with that?
Yeah, but then we have to consider that we have an excess at the moment. So maybe it needs to be less than that for a little while until we get to the point where it is back to where it would have been.
Yeah, that's reasonable. I think the problem is, like my question before about why do immigrants come here? The other side to that is like, why does the government let them come here? When we had the negative migration in COVID, ScoMo, don't know if you're a fan of him. He's a little authoritarian too, I guess. He was pressured by businesses, farmers in particular, because there was we're so distracted during COVID. So much happened. There was a fruit shortage. People don't remember because there was no farm pickers because they often backpackers and immigrants on that visa. A lot of them went home, and then Aussies didn't go and do those jobs. They tried to incentivize them, but they couldn't get them to do it. So this is the thing that I think this is the serious adult conversation. Is you don't just get to pull back migration and not have economic consequences. Do you at least agree with that? We might disagree what those are, but like you can't have a certain number of migration just rapidly change it, because we saw that in COVID. Like we've got a case study of it. It went to the negative, and businesses and governments panicked. Well, that's my opinion. They panicked, and then that's why we got the snapback, because these Australians, Aussies, whatever we're going to call ourselves, aren't doing the jobs.
Yeah, I mean, you'd never want to just rug pull on anything. You always want to do stuff gradually and take things to the direction you want to go gradually.
Is Labor not doing that when it comes to immigration? The numbers are going. They did peak. They peaked at about 500,000. I'm not a lefty that denies that, at about 2022, 2023 financial year. But year on year from then, they are coming down gradually. But it's not at a rate you'd like to see?
I don't know. The problem is that they do forecasts and they sort of make assumptions, but then last 2 years, so the last two financial years have both gone less than 2023, 2024. So 2022, 2023. So then 2023, 24 and 24, 25 have both come down though. So that's not a projection. That's fact. I don't know that they haven't stated that as being a goal. And they haven't really.
No, they have. Look, you can get the immigration. We're talking now. I don't want to take away from that.
Look, it's fine. It's going out.
It's literally on the website.
they're saying you're getting what you want, but so what they are saying, they do have it as a stated goal that they want immigration to go below a certain level eventually.
This is where, again, I don't think Labor have specified a number either, and I get frustrated by that. Like, that's why One Nation, it's hard to figure their number. I think they do now have on their website 135,000, but this is what I'm saying with the snapback, though. You can't just do that in 1 year, the way the economy is set up, because there will just be shortages of whether it's fruit, whether it's construction or healthcare. Now, I would love Aussies to do the job more, but then One Nation, and I know you're not a One Nation necessarily supporter, but like the Libertarians who, we loop back to where we started on minimum wage. I think, good worker protections and worker incentives are what would get some Australians out there working. Would that be the way? Because, your comment, I don't need to bring it up, but, you made one of the final comments in our exchange was about, if Aussies could do those shit jobs, they'd be more patriotic, or that would be how to bring maybe I'll get the exact quote if I don't want to misquote.
It was the other way around.
Is that your view?
I said it the other way around.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Yeah. So if Aussies actually felt that, this country actually meant something to them,
yeah,
then maybe that would encourage them to do something like that.
But how does doing like a shit job make you have your country mean something to you? We don't do the job. That's the thing. We don't. I think
this country means something to me.
The question, they don't. We had COVID as a case study. They didn't go out to the farms and pick fruit. I'm sorry, it just didn't happen.
What I'm saying is the country means something to me, and so therefore that encourages me to do something that's more of a sacrifice for the betterment of the nation.
Can you define? I don't know really what that means. I'm going to be honest. I don't know how that's a policy or how that what does the government do for, like, can you give like actionable steps of what that looks like?
Well, what I'm trying to say is you lower immigration to the point where Australians feel that it is actually their home. And
I don't know that's, I know in maybe your bubbles you feel that, but I think that's where there's a big gap, because I don't feel that. I know that the media, the right-wing media, tells people to feel that and believe it, and you're not providing me any facts today, so I don't have stats on some of those things about assimilation. But I don't feel that. My wife's an immigrant. I have many friends who are immigrants. My suburb has probably, I don't know the exact number, but it's known to be where a lot of immigrants buy houses and things like that. I do think it probably needs it's unsustainable numbers right now, but you're stating it kind of, that's why I cut you off. Like, you're stating it as fact that Australians don't feel that. Like, do you acknowledge there are other people that don't agree with that framing of it? That immigration means we don't feel like Australia anymore?
Like, I know that because I used to feel the same way. So I do know that there are other people that feel differently. But I just think that they haven't seen how it can be. And so that's like they haven't seen how it can be when it is Australia. Like,
what time period would you be referring to?
I don't know, like 2000, probably before 2000.
What year or range of years?
Anytime before 2000.
I lived during that time. It wasn't that different. Australia's gone downhill in a lot of ways economically, but I don't think it's because of immigration.
It depends on where you would have lived.
Gains tax discounts, negative gearing. Many Howard era policies are probably why we're more in the situation we're in.
Well, and maybe that's why it's the year 2000, and maybe he was the one that started the whole thing. But
well, they were a bit loose. I mean, this is the whole kind of lie from Sky News, is like the right wing. We saw it with ScoMo. They're actually quite pro-immigration.
Yeah, I know,
because they know the economy will tank without it.
Like most of the people that came in during Scott Morrison's term were, like, most of the extra houses that were created were inner city apartments. And that was, I mean, when I first moved to Sydney, I remember I thought, it's like New York or something. I'm going to live in the middle of the city and live in a big high rise or something like that. And, it was made clear to me, like, that's not really seen as what you want. You really end up going into like a terrace house or something like that. And then I realized, oh, okay, so that's sort of more the Australian way of doing things. That's what makes us a bit different to New York.
Yeah.
But anyway, so you look at Scott
Do we
Morrison.
want to be like New York?
He actually increased. No, Scott Morrison actually increased the amount of high-rise buildings, and so that's where all of the immigrants were going into, all the extra population.
Yeah, like students that, like education being like our top. It's always, it varies on the study, but it's always in the top 5, usually around number 3, behind like iron ore and whatever other minerals price is high that day. So we stopped that sort of like revenue stream for the government, and we talked about like funding dental and Medicare and sugar taxes and stuff, but we're going to just cut off like our 3rd biggest export.
And like my problem with what Scott Morrison doing that is because it threatens the Aussie dream of like having a backyard and all that. So that's what we really want.
But that's like a land. That's a very geographical land problem than immigrants, isn't it? Like there's only so much land, and and in terms of living distance from a city, only so many people.
I think it's because of the speed at which it's growing, and I think that if there was a more slow growth, then you would see, Newcastle and Geelong and these sort of extra places start to grow a bit more.
Who benefits from higher growth? Like private companies that?
Yeah, it's big business. It's like,
so do you want to regulate that? You want to slow down growth? How do we slow down growth?
You mean economic growth?
Well, you just said we're growing so fast.
Population growth.
Well, we're growing fast, and businesses are getting rich off that. So you want to slow down the growth?
Well, you just say no to them, to the businesses. If the business lobbies
how do you say no to a business? In politics speak, regulation?
No, you just say, no, thanks. We're not going to do that. We're not going to bring in, extra people that we don't have room for, just so that your profits can be high. It's not a regulation. It's just saying
you brought. Okay, let's just tease it out. You brought immigration into this a little bit again. Like you tried to weave it in there. You're saying that we're growing too fast?
You mean population growth is growing too fast?
Well, alongside that, let me just try and maybe I'm not understanding. You're saying like the Australian dream where like ScoMo built too many apartments, that's bad because the Australian dream is to own a house in a backyard. I fully agree. I'm very lucky I've ticked that box. I'm very happy for that, and I think more Australians should do it. But then you're saying that we're growing too fast. So I'm getting confused there. Are you saying like we're building too many of those houses with backyards, or the population's growing too fast?
The population was growing too fast, and the only way we could fit them in was into high-rise apartments. And so then the proportion of high-rise apartments as dwellings has grown since Scott Morrison's time, and that's bad.
Right, and with a growing population, that's more people working, more people paying tax, more revenue for the government, and also for businesses. So you want to slow down population growth, which will in turn slow down economic growth.
Yeah, I guess it probably would, yeah.
Big businesses, do you think we'll be happy with that or not?
No.
So what do we do then to hold the big businesses accountable? Because they're the ones that look, we talk about immigration. It's exactly what happened in 2020. They pressured ScoMo to be what they did. They didn't technically open any new spots, but they didn't like put any caps on. And that's why we got that big spike that we did for those 2 years after that. It was to make up for all of those, empty apartments and vacant jobs. Australians didn't do it.
I don't know. I just I imagine that it would lead to a period of hardship if we were to say drastically lower immigration. It would lead to a period of hardship, but like we would end up going back to a place where we're actually happy as people. So,
so a period of hardship. And see, this is where the right wing brush over it. Who suffers in that hardship? It's not the wealthy and the asset owners. It's the K-shaped recovery on steroids. It's people already struggling, right? And we're wanting to then cut them off. So they can't have any like lemonade or sweets or chocolate to make their life feel better because they're in this shitty situation, because we're going to tax the hell out of them on sugar. We're going to make them suffer. So we come out the other end more patriotic. Is that the argument?
The sugar tax is your thing, really. So But
No, you
yeah,
said
guess
you. I
you're
comment.
saying
No,
that
no, no,
like
no, no,
there's
no.
gonna.
You suggested it, and I said I'm not against it. You said
I
maybe
said
dental could come alongside. You said it first. Don't change the argument. I agree to it. Yeah.
I'm saying we want a sugar tax if we're doing free dental. Anyway, it's kind of like I get what you're saying. What you're trying to say
Okay,
is
so the period of hardship. What do Australians have to accept as the struggle for lower immigration?
I don't know exactly what form it would take, but it's pretty. I think it's reasonable to assume that everybody would suffer economically for a little bit.
I don't
Things
think
would
Gina
be
Reinhardt would suffer, would she? Unless she doesn't have her migrant workers at her mine.
the average people, yes, would struggle
And that
for
would
a period, including
So-
myself. And
with lower immigration, people struggle and then they become more patriotic.
I think so. I think that actually it's about
there's a missing stuff. There's a missing step there that I really would like to understand.
I don't see how when you make people feel like they actually have to work for something, then they get ownership over it. Whereas when it's just
I agree
of
that individual responsibility, working, people filling their day with work, I do not do. I'll just be really clear. I agree with you on that. We already have that though, man. Like
maybe
we
not
have.
work,
It's
but
like if you
I think
lose your
struggle
job, what payment? You said you've been on welfare before. I when I was a teenager had to go through this with a single mum. What's it called right now if you lose your job to get the Centrelink payment?
But that's
job seeker. They make you feel like shit for not having a job. And then there's during COVID, it was job keeper. And that actually people who didn't go on it probably don't even know, but it didn't go to people. It went to the business to pay the employee. So it went via the business. So businesses are always taken care of and the wealthy are always taken care of. But the struggling Aussies are the ones that suffer under these right-wing. They sound good on paper. I understand why people watch videos about lower immigration and how immigrants are a problem. We don't have a country anymore, all of that. But you think we'll have a country if we get rid of immigrants and have no one doing the jobs that immigrants do? We'll just lose all those things that we get, and we really won't have a country then.
What is the long-term, what's the long-term trend here? People who are currently immigrants are going to become the majority. We live in a democracy, okay?
Well,
so they're going to be voting, and so then it's not going to be us making decisions about what this country even is anymore.
You just answer me this: Do you watch Tucker Carlson?
I don't. I have watched.
Okay, that's because that's his exact quote. It's called
is
the
that
replacement
not
theory.
What would happen?
Well, they become. I think the thing you're missing is they become citizens. As I'm saying, you can disagree, but my wife is now an Australian because she got her citizenship. You don't have to agree with that. That's fine.
Yeah.
But that's how a country is. That's how our country is, because people assimilate. Now, I understand that. I know that there are immigrants that don't assimilate, and I haven't really done much on immigration on my channel yet, but I think it's very reasonable that people should be able to speak the language of the country that they immigrate to. I think that's completely reasonable. I disagree on where the incentives for that with my right-wing friends, but I think assimilation should be part of it. But this is the thing that I think I'm not going to. I apologize for the Tucker if you don't actually watch Tucker, but you're quoting a lot of the lines of these people. And this is where I say is if you're in that bubble, that's fine. But the thing is multiculturalism. And I know there's that gotcha of what's your favorite takeaway? And there's all the different takeaway foods and stuff like that. I'm not going to do that. But multiculturalism is so much more rich and complex than just these people are going to come in and we're not going to have a country anymore, because they become Australians, because they share our cultural values. And the thing that Labor does that the right wing never want to give them credit for is criminals do get deported. The deportation rate in Australia, if you commit a crime, you don't just get kept in Australia and given a citizenship. You can't become a citizen if you have a criminal record, unless you've done there's stringent criteria depending on the crime. It's it's not as black and white as that. But it's this kind of that we're soft on immigrant crime and stuff. It's talked about in the news, but the reality is nowhere near what it's being portrayed as, and what immigrants and what multiculturalism does for our society. And but this is when I said back to white Australia. If it's just that you don't like brown people, I'm not saying you, I'm just talking about anyone watching this. If you don't like Indians and Muslims and Africans, just say that. I do appreciate the racists in the sense of at least they're honest, if that's what they're really saying. But if it's more immigrants will come and they'll start voting for Labor, which, depending on the location, they maybe do or don't. I don't really understand what else is that we're not going to have a country. Like, as you said, like, what is Australia? It's a country. It's the people who live here, the people who have citizenship. That's what being Australian is. I don't think it really matters where you're born as long as you fit the criteria.
So when we are 20% of the population, what are they going to be?
Who's we? What's we, man? That's what you're saying. We. I don't know. Am I part of this? What is it?
People who were here in, say, the year 2000 and their descendants.
But why 2000? Like, why the cutoff? This is what I mean. There's arbitrary cutoffs. Why 2000?
Because
why? Because it was before 9/11, before the Muslims started coming here, because their countries got destabilized. Like, what is it?
I don't know. It's just that it's like that's the sort of group and the nation that created this country and created the nation state of Australia, and it's ours.
Do you know Chinese? You know, in the gold rush, people look this up. Chinese immigrants really started in the gold rush because, again, they were the ones that were willing to do the work. You know, it's like capital. It really is global capitalism, is what it is. They looked into the market. Who was going to come and work in the mines and risk their lives? Chinese.
You're mentioning like a very
Italians,
like,
and get another wave of it.
You're mentioning a very small amount of people and trying to make a big argument out of a really small thing.
No, I'm just giving an example because you're saying 2000, but I'm saying to you, like, you know, Pauline's swamped by Asians comment in 1997, her first speech to Parliament. But the Asians came in the 50s during the gold rush, or even earlier than that.
But to what degree? The difference is the degree, the amount that it's happening now.
Oh,
and
like,
and it's not even, as I said before, it could be you're including like English and people from the UK and North America in this as well, and New Zealand. I mean, New Zealand is a lot closer to us as a culturally, so I probably would.
Well, we also have the ANZ, like, you know, we're a little bit more interlinked, but yeah.
And yeah, so, but that's we. I mean, you might not consider yourself as part of.
I'm going to be honest. I still don't know what we is, because you have to have been in Australia you have to do a lot of conditions, but you can become a citizen. You've sort of said that that's not a we, or you're saying they're not an Aussie, but they're legally an Australian citizen. They're Australian legally. So if you're making like a moral argument, you can outline it. You've got the time. Like, I've got all day. we won't go past 2 hours, but if you want to outline, because you're not making a legal argument, it sounds like you're not saying. So you're saying it's like, my wife is not an Australian to you. She's a citizen, but she's not Australian. She's not Aussie. Not one of us.
Yeah, it's a bit weird linguistically to have a difference between Aussie.
I think.
A difference between Aussie and Australian, but that is how I view it, and I get that terminology. They like people who are like, this was sort of shocked me when I first moved to a city, and I heard people who are from, you know, like an Australian city, and people who are sort of from Italian or Greek ancestry referring to us as Aussies. And I was like, what do you mean Aussies? Like, isn't everyone an Aussie? And they refer to like white Australians as Aussies, and they refer to themselves as, oh, we're Italians, we're Greeks, and you're Aussies. And when I first heard that, I thought that it was a really sort of shocking thing to say. But over time, I've realized that that's just the best word for it. That's just,
so it's cultural.
Know, it's culture, it's ancestry, it's, yeah.
Okay.
And so that's the we. So we are going to be a minority, and that's what it is that people are assimilating into. And so if we are a minority, then they're not going to be assimilating into that anymore. So it's like,
I mean, I do you know that? Like, again, like with the data, how do you know that even if, well, you're saying this, what is the 20%? Is it people that are born in us? Because we're jumping between
that
legal
was just
and
a number.
But you're saying we. Who is I still don't know who the we is. Is it literally like you're born in Australia, so you get? Let's just say, I'll give you an example. My daughter, even though her mother was an immigrant, is now a citizen legally, is born in Australia, so she's got an Australian passport, born here, so she's in that 20%, whatever the number is. She's in the club, but my wife isn't in the club.
Well, she's like half that. She's like half Aussie.
Okay, culturally, so it's a cultural argument.
Well, yeah.
You know, I'm half New Zealand. So you're talking to someone who might not even be in the club. My dad's from New Zealand, but I was born in Australia. My mother was born in Australia.
You're
so
like
where do I fit in?
You're individualizing it and trying to think how do we decide each individual person?
Well, you're putting people into boxes. You're saying this 20%. That's what I'm telling you. I don't know what the 20% is. You're saying we. I still can't figure it out because you're saying it's not. Like, you're not. It's not Australian citizens by legal definition. It's not necessarily cultural if it's not by individuals. So what is the we?
I'm saying that it's a group that I'm referring to.
But how do you get into the group?
What you need to do, once you start talking about individuals, once you start trying to...
A group is made of individuals, right? A group, definition of a group, multiple individuals.
Yes. So
you're the bouncer at this elusive group of Australians, Aussies. Who gets in the door?
You just can't think of it that way. It's a.
Well, you're in a group. Okay.
It's like
let's just go to the basic language. You're in a group, you're out of a group, right?
It's like trying to say this. What is the, like, do you have the average amount of kids? Do you have 2.3 kids? No, or not 2.3, 1.7. Nobody has 1.7 kids. But you can still say that there is an average amount of kids.
In that thing, you'd be a parent or you'd be not a parent. So you can be a parent at different degrees, but you're talking about we and them. Right? You're saying like 20 will get replaced eventually by immigrants. And I'm saying, well, I don't understand. Like, or that they won't assimilate. When we know, I believe that the ones like my extensive anecdotal evidence and the evidence on terms of how many people become citizens, how we kick out the people that commit crimes, like all the actual data around the economics of immigrants suggests that they do integrate into society. Because, right, they buy houses, right? And with a backyard. Isn't that the Australian dream? So some immigrants are living the Australian dream. How Australian is that to live the Australian dream? Shared values.
What I was trying to say is that, like, when the we that you don't think is a valid term.
I just don't know. No, I'm not saying it's not valid. I don't know who we suggest the group. A group is made of individuals. I'm trying to define how does an individual get into the group or not, and you still haven't told me.
You know that you can also be part of. There's like Venn diagrams with it where you can be sort of an edge cases. So you're in an edge case because you've got this New Zealand thing. I'm in a bit of an edge case too because my great grandparents, I believe, were German immigrants.
Were they here before 2000?
Yes, so it's fine.
Yeah. I'm just being just roasting you at that point. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, well, that's
and I've felt that, and I've felt this. I mean, people sometimes think that I'm not Australian. They think that I'm from Europe or something because I don't know why, but like, so I've felt that a little bit too, and that's generations back. Yeah, but based off how I look, they thought. Yeah.
So this is what I'm saying. For me, that's simple. This is where I don't understand. And I'm not saying this is the libertarian thing. But it, like, if you watch this back and hear the argument you're outlining, it makes it really, like, it's very convoluted to get to the answer of, like, we just don't want we want to lower immigration because they're not us. And that's what I'm saying is, like, well, what's us? For me, it's just, are you an Australian citizen or not? Legally, the definition. And if you commit crimes, if you do things that are against our laws and things, you do get deported. Now, maybe some don't, and who is we? Like, who are these people replacing us? It's like multiculturalism is just a part of the modern world. And now I know if that's where, I think that's a lot of where like MAGA, make America great again or make Australia great again comes from, is like, we want to go back to this idyllic time. But it's not like, are we talking about Aboriginals? Because everyone else, it depends what year you put the stake in the sand of what year it counts to be Australian.
Well, that's an important thing I should add is that, like, Aboriginals, so like you sort of look at sort of traditionally up until for the vast majority of Australia's history, I guess, it's not Australia because that began in 1901. So you'd want to go back a little bit to 18th century. You're looking at, Europeans and Aboriginals, and it's sort of this biracial place. And that is where the nation came from. And then in 1901, you have just the Europeans becoming part of Australia. And then in 1967, you had the Aboriginals being included as being also part of Australia. And that was, unanimously pretty much decided by the whole country, because obviously at that point, people felt that Aboriginals were part of the nation. And I think that really gets at it, is that it's really about what people feel, and the legal definition comes after that. And so it's really about what people feel. Whereas I feel like you have it the other way around, where it's like the legal definition comes first and then we construct our feelings around that. And I just don't think that
I just think I get what you're saying. And you're kind of saying the right wing are very emotional because they base their rationality on feelings, which I'm glad you acknowledge.
Yes.
But no, when you're making a definition, you're saying a definition. Maybe you're going to back down on it, but you were saying you went back. I know the 20% was just a made up number, but that the immigrants are going to replace us. But what I'm saying is, when you get your citizenship, you are Australian. Now, you could definitely say, but I feel like that's not fair or the case. I'm saying you could be making a moral argument. Then you can make it, which you haven't really yet. But I don't necessarily base policy decisions on feelings, because feelings, as we know, they're valid. People are allowed to feel whatever they want to feel. But then, a lot of bad decisions in history were made on feelings. We don't need to go through all of the dictators and all of their feelings about certain races and groups, but feelings is not always the best way to design a policy, I would suggest. Or the legal definition of an Australian is someone that has an Australian citizenship, which
what I'm trying to say is that what it is that we characterize as being an Australian citizen is going to change if we continue the current set of policies that we have.
Well, but what gives you that?
We're not
basis?
What we characterize.
Is that a feeling or is that a fact?
I don't see how it can be any other way. Why would it be any other way? It's because you're going to change the people, and so then those people are going to be part of a democracy, which is then going to decide the character of the nation. And so then, if you change the people, then the character of the nation will also change. And you're saying that we deport people, or we don't allow people to become Australian citizens if they've broken the law. The laws are going to change in the future to more.
Who says?
Because that's what happens in a democracy. The people decide the laws.
You're saying murder's not going to be legal. What specific laws? We got the internet again. Let's go through the laws. What laws are going to change?
Let's I don't know. Well, okay. Australians care a lot about workers' rights. Okay. That's something that's
why Labor's in power in most states and federally, yes.
And so other countries don't care as much about that. So based off the way that they vote, okay? So if we were to bring people from those countries into here, maybe we'd lose the workers' rights that you like.
Would someone leaving their country, why would they, if they really agreed with the values of that country, you're making a logical leap of a person coming from a country 100% agrees with all the laws of their country and will slowly acquire political power in a new country to make the country they left more or the country they've gone to more like the country they left.
Well, they're going to have children, and here's the thing:
who will be Australian if they're born in Australia, I guess.
But here's the thing that is, I really think the fundamental point is that personality is actually determined by. It's actually genetically determined far more than it is by. It's you inherit personality traits. We think that the brain and that the personality is just this cloud sort of in the air thing, which is just not affected by biology and by evolution in any way. And that's actually just not how it is.
So are black people more stupid than white people?
No, I didn't say that.
They're more violent than white people. Or do they have personality traits that are more towards aggression?
I don't know. Maybe. I guess so. If they're showing higher rates of those things.
You're talking to a psychologist. I don't want to play the. I'm not talking about it as my title. We can talk about the evidence. Do you want to provide the citations of where that theory comes from?
I would. we operate on the assumption that that's not how it works, and that if you understand evolution is a very strange assumption to make. The first assumption you would make is that people are going to have different expressions when it comes to intelligence and when it comes to aggression.
Yes.
All of that is going to be different.
Culturally, some are more higher than others as a culture or a race or ethnicity.
Your environment is going to, the environment that your ancestors...
You just said, no, that's the opposite of, you just said genetics.
No,
you just said it's entirely determined by genetics. You're right. The reality is it's both. You've just
the environment that your ancestors grew up in going back 10,000 years, okay, that is what determines...
But why would that, if it's hereditary, why would that matter? Wouldn't they just have inherited it from their ancestors?
They've inherited...
So it was environmental then, and now it's genetic.
It's only environmental on long time scales. That's how long it takes the environment to affect you.
Australia's, in general, a pretty safe country.
Yeah.
So if someone was born here from another culture, they could inherit, or the environment could shape them to be more non-violent. Or are they born violent?
Well, you're trying to say like, now then we need to, like, every time I see someone from a certain background, I need to be worried that they're going to attack me. That's ridiculous. It's not how it is at all.
No,
it's just that if we're trying to look at differences between groups and we're trying to explain why that exists, the first explanation should be because they have different genes.
But then those genes were from the environment of ancestors.
Well, you know how evolution works.
Yeah, it's both. It's called a bidirectional relationship. You know, genes can influence environment and vice versa.
No, so over very long time scales,
yes,
the environment selects for particular genes to become more prevalent and particular ways of being to become more prevalent in a population. And you take that population and put them into a new place for another 1,000 years, maybe. They're still going to have the same traits that they had, that their ancestors had 10,000 years ago.
With modern research, we know that the environment can have an effect on genes in the opposite direction. And behaviors, we've got to be clear too, violence is a behavior, right? So even people may carry some kind of violence gene, which I don't know which races you're attributing that to, but we can unpack that.
I mean, look at European history if you want violence. So I'm not trying to say, you know, European people are peace-loving and perfect at all.
Yeah, and well, I guess that's the whole point. Like in a society, humans are messy. You don't have like, it's what I was saying about Aussies, this idea of like Australians, like it's not like the guy that abused all those children down in Victoria at the childcare center is, I guess, everything you've described. I would have to put him in that category of Aussie. Now, I'm not necessarily saying we take away citizenship from people because of their behaviors, but you're kind of saying we don't want to import these certain genes or something. Is that kind of there's like these genes out there in these societies, even though we know things like, and this is the other thing, poverty. We haven't even talked about like, you know, class structures and poverty, that those people in those countries, these more violent or culturally uncohesive countries or whatever we want to call them, often have large amounts of poverty and corruption and things like that too. The people that leave that often see that, and that's why they got out. You know, this is the thing that I say with immigrants, we're often getting the best of the best. Because you know how hard it is to go from one country to another? You don't just like walk out of your house and end up in Australia.
But then, yeah, it's not just the individual that you're taking them and all of their offspring going into the future.
So the kids are violent. Oh, you mean their genes?
They're going to have higher propensity for anything. It's not even, I don't understand why you're focusing on that particularly. It's really just...
You brought it up. I didn't bring up genes. You said there's genes out there.
I don't see why you're focusing on violence in particular.
Oh, well, what are you referring to then? People have different genes. Yes, we know that.
It could be anything and everything, and that's the whole point. It's really just everything.
But we have that in Australia. So this is the thing, right? We have that in Australia. People vary. I'm not going to argue with that. Individual differences are what make humanity so like interesting and cohesive, and like all the variation is part of that, but also all the bad stuff too. That's exactly like how politics works. Is like you're not going to get a perfect utopia, unfortunately.
Here's how I put it: things that you think, things that you don't like will become more prevalent, and things that you do like will become less prevalent. Because you
Me
like,
individually, or just what?
yes, because the things that you like and don't like are heavily determined by your genes, and you have very similar genes to me and to all of the other people who were here pre-2000, except for the Aboriginals, because that's a very interesting specific case. But
Yeah, what are their curious about their genetics? What do we know about that? How do they vary from white people?
I don't know. I haven't looked into it.
Okay. So we're making, so is it a like, if they could come up with technology that could scan the genes of immigrants, would we be able to like discriminate? So if we had the 100,000, we would be able to let them in on certain, like if they have a certain expression or a certain, because genes can be expressed or they can be dormant. We check for their genes and then we can let them in if they have good genes.
But how would you decide what are good genes and what are not good
I don't
genes?
know. That's why I'm not making a genetic argument for immigration.
There's like there's like a trillion genes, I think, that humans have, or a billion. I don't know.
Yeah, well, it's and a lot of them are very similar, like a variation. Yeah.
You can't go through and decide which ones are good and which aren't. And good means what you think of as being good. Okay, like a lion thinks that a zebra that runs too fast is bad. Okay, and a slow zebra is a good
as much
zebra.
as lions, I don't think lions think in good or bad. They think of survival because they don't have.
But that's what I'm trying to say. When we as humans think good means something that is beneficial for us.
Well, and I think immigration is beneficial for us. We're in a global society. Our third biggest export is education. We have a lot of international students that bring in a lot of money, do a lot of the jobs, pay a lot of the taxes, and like regional doctors we haven't even talked about. Like One Nation, they're going to be in for a shock if they cut immigration. They won't see this thing. They'll be like Libertarian and pick and choose. They'll let the regional doctors stay, like Trump has let the Mexicans stay in the farms, because they begged him when he got elected again. They were like, oh shit, we didn't realize that it could affect us, this policy. So we'll beg Trump to let us keep our Mexicans. So I think what you're saying is like what I see as good and bad, our cultural values in that. The world is I think we should still have. I'm not like an open borders person. We need our borders in a nation, and we're lucky Australia is surrounded by water, so we can have a pretty clear idea of who's coming in and who isn't. But this is where I just fundamentally disagree with you. Is like I don't think immigration's bad. I just don't.
I'm just saying that if you don't believe in we, so I'm not even allowed to say that. But I'm just going to say.
No, you can. I'm not policing. You can say whatever you want. I just don't know who we is. Don't say you can say. You can say whatever you like. You can say whatever you like. I just do not understand what we is. And you sort of said before it's like feelings based. So I guess it's whoever we feel like is we on the day. I guess I don't know. I don't know what it is.
Okay. Well, I'm just going to pretend that you do. So if we become a minority,
how about wait. Comment below if you know who we is. Who is we? let's get the definition and we'll define it.
I reckon if you wouldn't want to do it because you wouldn't want to prove my point. But if we were to just go through some celebrities, you would be able to say who you'd be able to say who I would say is we.
Well, I would look up if they're an Australian citizen or not. So Hugh Jackman would be.
But you'd be able to say who I would think.
Donald Trump wouldn't be because he's not an Australian citizen.
Yeah.
Yes, I would be able to do it because my definition is if you're a citizen or not.
But you'd be able to say who I would think would be included in.
No, I don't know. Well, okay, give me a name and let's see. Give me a name.
Chris Hemsworth.
Oh, well, yeah. Well, I think so. Yeah. Because he's an Australian citizen. I think you're doing the whole, he's a white Thor looking guy. So maybe that's why. I don't know. Or would you say no?
Well, what about Jim Jeffries, the comedian?
No, wait, hang on. Is Chris Hemsworth a yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. Jim Jeffries? Did he change to an American citizen? Because he's been there for a long time.
He might have, yeah. But would I say that he's Aussie?
If you're talking about the cultural thing, then probably, I guess maybe you would. Unless you'd also define how long he's been living in America, because he's been there a long time. So maybe. I would say yes. Leaning yes, but probably a maybe. I don't know.
Anyway, I don't know. I think that...
What would you say for Jeff? You can't just start this game and then bail on it. Would Jim Jeffries be it or not?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
What about Fatima Piman, the senator?
No.
But she's an Australian citizen. She's a politician.
Yeah, I know, but she is like.
What features does she have that make her not Aussie? Let's go through them.
Well,
Is it because she's a woman? I mean, women can be Australian.
Women can be
or not?
Australian, yes.
Muslims? Can Muslims be Australian?
Why is it so like?
That's a yes no question.
Well, I mean, if you were like a convert, then yeah. If you converted to Islam, then you would be. Then you could be. Sorry.
I mean, you could make the argument all people technically convert. You know, you acquire language and then you learn what it is, and then.
Well, I think most people just get what they get from their parents, and then they just, you know, stay in it or not stay in it.
Okay. So Fatima Piman is not an Aussie. It's not because she's a woman, it's because she's a Muslim.
Yes.
Is that correct?
I mean, women can be Australian, yeah.
But not Muslims.
Well, but it's like, why is she Muslim? Like, why is that so obvious that she would be? Because that's where that was her family's background. So.
But she's Australian, like as a citizen. She's Australian citizen, right? Like whether you agree that that's Aussie or not, that's true.
Yeah.
And she doesn't have any dual citizenships because, you know, you can't be in Parliament if you have any. Yeah.
Yeah.
But she's not. She's Australian citizen, but not Aussie.
Yes.
Okay. I see. I don't define the world like that, but all right. Do we want to do any more?
All I'm trying to say is that, like, when those people are, when we are well in the minority, and also like across the whole nation, you start to see that, like, in every electorate, we're also the minority. The like laws and politicians that you and I don't like will become more prevalent, and you won't have any say in it. You just
what laws? What specific laws is Fatima Piman pushing for that would be bad? Like that would be these laws you're speaking of? Because she's pretty run of the mill. She left the Labor Party, but her Australian Voice Party is. Like, we could bring up the policies if we want to have a look at them. They're pretty run of the mill.
She's just an individual person, and she's being voted in by a country that is still majority us. So she still represents us.
So what's the fear then? That's the part I don't understand.
At some point, you're going to have.
Is she like a troll? Do you think she's like hiding something under her burqa?
At some point in the future, you're going to have politicians who may be European ancestry, but they're going to be voted for and selected by a population that is not European ancestry or not Australian ancestry, and
so it is racial. But it's racial at the end of the day, because you sort of slipped up there when you said European ancestry, because you were saying that like European wouldn't necessarily be Aussie.
Well, no, because if we were to have
Muslim, European, so it's kind of a religious racial thing.
If we were going to get replaced by Germans and British people, this exact same thing I'm talking about would happen. So, like, you would start to see changes in the kinds of politicians that are being elected.
Well, look, I guess what you look. I'll try and give it I'll try and like steelman the argument. You're kind of right. You're saying like if a dominant culture comes in, like you're right. Like politics often reflect the dominant culture, and so if over time the dominant culture shifts, then Australia would then reflect that dominant culture. Is that essentially what it is?
Yes.
I think you're thinking of culture in a very black and white, monolithic, us versus them way, which I think the right wing know what they're doing when they do that, because then it divides you and me, who might be, you know, like we sound pretty like agreed in maybe some of the economic things about holding multinational corporations to account, like, you know, with the libertarian stuff, freedom, we actually have quite a lot to agree on. I think this focus is what divides us, because with that cultural divide, I don't like, as I said, like with my wife being now Australian from another country, my daughter being like a mix of that, and then if she ends up dating someone who's also a mix, that's like the idea of like the melting pot of culture, where it's like culture becomes more of a, I guess, like this, who's this we? It almost becomes blurred lines intentionally. And this is where maybe we disagree. I don't think that's a bad thing, because that's the way, whether we like it or not, that's the way the world's going. So the country that my daughter is half of, she's been there once. She's starting to acquire language, and we say, are you Australian, or are you, I'm not going to say the country, but like, are you this? And she says, I'm Australian. So so she's like 2 and she's identifying as Australian. So I think
Yeah.
what your argument takes away from the complexity of it is people can like, like there's the legal definition of like you're a citizen or not based on that piece of paper that's legal. But the thing you're saying too is like that there's this kind of like monolith of like this evil culture or this culture that's not Australian culture that's coming to get us. And what I'm saying is like, you even said families before. You and your family disagree, it sounds like, politically. I disagree with my family, but I'm not going to say they're any less Australian or Aussie, because at the end of the day, most people want, security for their families. They want that house with the backyard. Most people just want to have a decent life and be sort of left alone to do their thing. And I think immigrants, there's a myth that they're not like that, and because they point to like a few cases. But as I can say, you can equally point to cases of Aussies, like the child abuser in the childcare center, who's clearly not living to those values. So does that move your mind? Does that land with you at all? Or is that completely flat, that argument that like culture is actually quite complex? It's not just like there's this like mountain of like Muslims coming to like take us over. There's internal disagreements within Islam, right? There's so many different subcategories and they're at war with each other all the time. You know what I mean? It's not like as simple as it might seem. Is that fair? Can we agree on one thing? Your face, I'll tell you why I'm asking. Your face doesn't look like agreement. We've only literally just met while recording this, but your face is not showing agreement to me right now. And it's concerning me.
Yeah, I don't really agree. I think that, I do think that it would just, I don't know. It's like, I sort of feel like you've thrown quite a few things at me there, but like,
yeah, I tend to do that. Sorry. Look, I'll just simplify it to one sentence so you can sort of have at it in an easier way. I guess what I'm saying is at the very base of it, that Australia is becoming more culturally diverse, but I think heaping individuals or like cultures together as like Muslims are X, this culture is X, just really diminishes like this idea of like what is an Aussie. Well, that could mean many different things to many different people, and that's actually, in my view, that's okay. And I'm okay to be disagreed with.
My answer to that is obviously it's not a monolith. It's not black and white. It is a lot closer to a monolith and black and white than you think it is. It's not that, okay, but it's a lot closer to being that than you think it is. Just, yeah.
Okay.
And if we assume that that's not how the world is, we'll be wrong about that. And you keep saying that like that's the way the world's going. That's the way the world's going in Western countries. It's not like that for the other 80% of the population, of the world's population.
That's because Western countries most of them have some form of social democracy, and that's why those countries are so stable and a good place to live. Aside from other things like good beaches and the media representations, but they only got to that way because of the mixed model of capitalism with good regulations leads those countries to be an awesome place that people want to go. And the destabilization of those other countries, like Trump bombing Iran, you think that creates terrorists? Like, I don't think genetic people aren't terrorists genetically. Their family get blown apart. And of course they're going to hate those people that did that.
Yeah. And this is one of the main reasons why I'm so scared about like, voting for someone who's going to be a hawk on the Middle East.
Okay. Well, we agree on that. You're anti-interventionist, are you? Like we shouldn't get involved?
I feel like we're being forced into this situation where it's like, if you want to have a country, then you have to also attack everyone else. Or if you want to not attack other people, you can not have a country. And it's like they've forced us into this dichotomy in every Western country. And it's like, no, I want to have a country and I also want to not hurt everyone else. Can we have that party? But that party never exists. So
yeah, look, I mean, what's your thought on like investing in some kind of targeted foreign aid where we can help state? I know it hasn't gone well with America, like regime change isn't great, but like providing support to countries to be able to be in a position to take their citizens back, because we do know like a lot of citizens would, like the asylum seekers often don't necessarily want, like they'll just come to Australia because it's their lives are at threat and they're just like, all right, I'll go here. A lot of the time it's like that. Would you be supportive of I mean, that's government money, but would you be okay with something like that?
Pay for it. Yes. Pay for it.
Okay,
absolutely.
Great. All right. We'll start that party and we'll get going.
Okay.
We do have to wrap up now. I don't want it to go over 2 hours. So how do you feel the conversation went, Matt? I really appreciate you coming on, because so many right-wingers that comment don't actually follow up and actually chat with me. So I do actually genuinely appreciate that. How do you feel it went?
Well, I was, like, I didn't want to do too much research and just come at you with hits. I know that sounds really dumb. I wanted to just come at you with vibes.
Yeah, you want to have a
that
conversation. Yeah, you didn't want to
so
have
that it
paper
would feel a bit more raw, and we could maybe build something together. So I guess I've learned to ways I can hone my ideas, and also, maybe there's some stuff I need to look into a bit further, and maybe I'm not quite right, but yeah.
Yeah. One thing that I hope you take away from the left, like, I don't know if I represent all left. Obviously, you've somehow watched my content, which I appreciate. But I think that's the thing, is like, I think a lot of these topics, and we can come back on and maybe do like, a specific policy. We were kind of jumping around a lot, but we could do one with data and go into it. I think we all agree often that we want Australia to be the best country it can be. And we just have very different solutions to what that is. But I do think the best thing we can do is talk and communicate, because when we're completely siloed off in our bubbles, I hope you agree, that's really when bad things happen. When two sides of it, a left or right or whatever spectrum, aren't talking to each other, that's when things go really wrong. Like, that's destabilization. So the fact that you came on and talked to me, I really appreciate. And we will, I hope, I'm not going to make you commit on air to come back, but I appreciate the chat, Matt, and hopefully we'll talk again soon.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for your channel. Your channel is really good, and you should keep doing what you're doing. It's really good.
Thank you.